Welcome back to another episode of Creatures of the Night podcast, and I'm Chris.
And I'm Wendy. Sorry, I paused there. I thought my little pop screen thing was moving on me. I'm like, it's about to slam down any second.
It's like, oh, right now, right as she's about to queue up, and we're down, and we're going.
It likes to do that.
Well, listen, I got to tell you something really freaking crazy. And I was dying. Like, I wanted to tell you this like right away, but I had to save it for our podcast. So check this out. The other night, I was laying in bed, and I was really having like a hard time getting to sleep. I mean, struggling. And I don't do that often anymore. Like, I usually lay down, go to sleep, and I'm out. But the other night, I'm stressed out, thinking about work. I mean, my mind is racing all over the place. I tossed and turned forever. And I was sitting there. Well, I was actually laying there trying to tell myself not to think about work anymore. You know, change your thought. Think about something else. Think about something that you like. So then I'm like, SK Pierce. Boom. It's the first thing that comes to mind, right? We were just there. I can think about, you know, some of the things that we saw, some of the things that happened, and just try to get all the stressful shit out of my mind. It's not working. I flip over onto my belly and I'm like, okay, if this keeps up, I'm just going to have to go downstairs, because if I keep tossing and turning, I'm going to wake up my husband. My husband isn't the kind of person that can just easily go back to sleep, and I don't want to wake him up. So rolling around, roll over on my belly, and I'm laying there, and I'm like the last thought is, if this doesn't work, I'm going to have to just try one of those apps, you know, that Audible has now. You can download it, and it's some guy talking very nicely about cucumbers, you know, just over and over again. The next thing I know, I'm actually being held down in bed. I can feel this massive weight, this horrendous, scary, terrifying pressure on me, and I cannot fucking move. And what was even worse is that I couldn't even scream, Wendy. I tried so hard to scream, but only like the littlest noise was coming out of my mouth, and it was making it so much worse. It was terrifying. I could feel this presence, like I said, just pressing down on me, and everything in my power to move failed me. And like, as it got worse, there was this sensation that came over me to just give up, just go back to sleep. And I'm like terrified. I'm like, no, I got to get out of this thing. And I'm trying so hard to scream, but nothing is coming out like at all, maybe like a squeak, and that's it. And then all of a sudden the bed starts shaking like, and then boom, suddenly I came to and broke free from whatever this presence was, and was screaming bloody murder to my poor husband, who had apparently been trying to wake me up from whatever nightmare I was just having.
So you were like asleep the whole time?
The whole time I was fucking sleeping. And that's when I realized, oh my God, that was a dream. And of course my husband's like, what the hell? Were you dreaming about work? No. Go back to bed. I'm sorry. But the funny thing is, it's like, seriously, like, he woke me out of that trance sleep that I was having to me just screaming all of a sudden. He says, so first of all, he knows that I sometimes sleep talk and I make weird noises. It doesn't make any sense. It's all gibberish. It's me in my dream world trying to say something, and it just doesn't come out. So what you get is what he, you know, likes to impersonate of me is it's these weird noises. And that's exactly what I was hearing when I was trying to scream in my dream, was that that was all I could get out.
I would love to hear his side of the story, because it has to be somewhat terrifying, unless he's just like semi-used to it now. Somebody just screaming in their sleep is terrifying.
Right. Well, when I finally got out of it and I was screaming and I was sitting up in bed at this point, like, I realized, oh shit, that was a dream. Nothing happened. I was just dreaming. And of course, my husband's super panicked. He's terrified. Like, what's going on? What's happening? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, go back to bed. Again, like, in my mind, I'm like, oh shit, he's not going to be able to go back to sleep if I start telling him, you're not going to believe what the fuck. So of course the dog's going bananas too, because I just started screaming bloody murder, right? She's like, wow, what's happening? Is it time to go out? Is it cookie time? I did something good, right? You know, so the next morning, go downstairs. My husband's like, okay, spill it. What the hell was going on? So I told him everything that was happening. And of course, I thought it was funny that the first thing that he thought was that it was me dreaming about work, because I wanted to scream so bad. But I was having a problem going to sleep because I was stressing out about work too, which he knew because I was telling him about some of the stuff going on. But yeah, he just kind of shook his head and laughed it off. But you probably would like to hear his side of the story, the way that he makes fun of me. Well, not making fun of me, but basically telling you what I sounded like. It's kind of weird and creepy, because to think of someone just laying there in their dream state and they're just What the hell are you doing?
That is odd, yes. But I'm just saying, you're fast asleep, and then all of a sudden, someone is screaming in the room.
I know.
And then it is terrifying to see it's your loved one, So then you're worried, like, what is wrong with you? Are you being attacked? And you're like, nah, it's just a dream. Never mind.
Just go back to sleep. I'll tell you about it in the morning. Of course, he's like, what? No, I'm like, seriously, just don't worry about it. Go to sleep. Like, I realized then it was just a dream. It's almost like, walking away from a horror movie and realizing it was just a horror movie, right? But yeah, it was kind of funny. One of the other things that I was able to realize afterwards, and, because this one was such a vivid dream, I was actually able to think about it some more. I don't have those kind of dreams anymore where I can sit here and really think about it. But the bedroom that I was in, Wendy, it was the red room at SK Pierce. So here I am laying in bed trying to take my mind somewhere else. SK Pierce, we were just there. So I guess a lot of stress toppled with crazy emotions and a place that has, become so vivid and such a good investigation for us that when I go to sleep, I guess my brain still takes that stress with it. And it's like, we're just going to put that somewhere else. Let's try this. See how she likes that.
Well, it's really sad because it's like the negativity from your workplace, it's creeping into even like when you're trying to have a positive, I'm going to my comfort place, it's even fucking all that up. That's horrible.
That was horrible. Well, so after I woke up screaming bloody murder, I did sleep great the rest of the night.
You got it out. They talk about that. People say that you got to have those exercises where you like let it all out, and there's people like just screaming into, I don't know, canyons and mountains or whatever. But you should just be on your balcony basically at the back of your house and just yell before you go to bed and be like, what?
Every night.
And just releasing it. Good night, y'all.
Yeah, right. And I'm all set. 5 months from now, the neighbors are going to be like having company over. They're like, what the hell is that? Don't worry. She's just doing her nightly thing.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a trip?
I don't think you can get the cops called on you for that. Just one scream a night?
I didn't think about that. Maybe I'll go back to, I did before. I used to just scream in my car, and I did actually feel better about that. But we also used to go to Six Flags a lot too, and I screamed my ass off there. I didn't realize how therapeutic something like that could be.
Maybe that's why we like scary stuff. That's why you're always screaming at fucking investigations.
Well, I always looked at that as me just really enjoying it. When we would go to haunted houses or the haunted corn mazes or whatever, and someone's coming at you with the fake saw or, they pop out at you. I scream all the time too. And then I laugh because it's an enjoyable moment for me. And maybe it is that release of the fear. And then I'm like, everything's okay now. I guess I didn't get killed. So
good job.
But yeah, I came so close to texting you and I was like, nope, I'm saving it.
Well, the whole time you were telling the story, I thought you were about to say that it was just Pandora that had gotten on your back.
Oh, that poor cat. If I had bounced out of bed screaming, first of all, I would have been clawed to death, and I would have never seen that cat anywhere near that bed again. She would have been traumatized for life,
Yeah, no, I get it. They're like that.
Because I was talking about my cat before the podcast. I got to get this big booty bitch a brand new litter box because she won't go in the litter box anymore. And Wendy's like, yeah, it's because you're screaming at her in the middle of the night. But needless to say, I had to work on a podcast at some point. So the next day after having that dream, for some strange reason, it led me down the path of looking for a haunted Airbnb. I'm not really sure why, but it just came to mind. So started looking them up, and God, there's actually quite a bit of them just all over the place, sprinkled in everything from like legitimate castles with real juicy history that are said to be extremely haunted to like everything like just very unsuspecting homesteads that just happen to be in, really convenient locations. And what I found most interesting from those searches are that the places that were not as glamorous actually seem to be the most haunted. There's this one cute little gingerbread house in Bisbee, Arizona, said to be the Pie Lady's home. Nope, that is not a spirit. The owner just happens to really love baking, I guess. But she says that this sweet, pet-friendly getaway is haunted, having reportedly repeated episodes of odd, unexplainable mischief. But there's like nothing to worry about. She says it's not malevolent. And for only $65 a night, I thought, wow, what a steal. Totally worth it.
Yeah, Bisbee's one of those places. It's like so many of the locations, if not like all of them, have some kind of spirit lingering behind.
Bisbee is definitely one of those places. Like I said, it has a lot of history, but this is just a little house that she's like, I don't know what's going on here. You know, you can stay and be in Bisbee because that's cool, or you can stay and there's ghosts. You know, to each his own. There might be a pie waiting for you.
Right. I like the idea of pie.
I love pie. It's got to be gluten-free for me, though. So yeah, I mean, if you get to do any traveling, just check and see, you know, what's out there. And if it's, you know, a haunted Airbnb, because why not? Way more convenient and way more cost effective than renting out a whole haunted hotel, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And speaking of haunted places, let me tell you about something else that's a little spooky. If you're ready for a story.
I am ready for a story.
All right. So for my story, I'm taking y'all to Jamaica.
Ooh.
Montego Bay, to be precise, and right over to the Jamaican Georgian-style mansion, best known as Rose Hall.
I love this.
Oh, you're going to die, Wendy. This is such a great story. So Rose Hall is the most infamous location in Jamaica, and it's beautiful. Well, it was. But then it fell into ruin by the 1960s, and somebody took notice of it falling apart. So they bought it and fixed it back up, restored it to its former splendor. Rose Hall has mahogany floors throughout, paneling and wooden ceilings, and the finest silk wallpaper, which happens to be printed with birds and palms. Get it? It's not for everyone. Go big or go home, right?
So like Hawaiian shirt look or something. What is that?
I don't know. Caribbean, I guess.
Bring the outdoors in type thing.
Right. I actually really prefer the wallpaper that they put up at SK Pierce. It was more of like a goth Victorian.
It looked like velvet lace everywhere. The colors were so rich. It was beautiful. You know, beautiful. I didn't realize, though, that it was those types of fabrics.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I wonder what that looks like in person and feels like. They'd probably be like, don't touch anything. And I'm like secretly over there rubbing on everything.
I know. I feel like Willy Wonka licking does this taste like a banana? There are also ornate chandeliers throughout, and the home is furnished with sweet European antiques. There is now a bar and a restaurant downstairs in what was once the dungeon. Fancy,
nice.
Right?
Yes. So I have seen this like on TV, though I don't remember anything really. If it didn't happen like yesterday, then I've forgotten it. So the story will still seem kind of new to me. But I think at the time it was on TV, it did not have any kind of restaurant and bar. So that's pretty snazzy. I like that.
Yeah, I think it depends on which show you saw or where you saw it, because it has been on TV quite a bit.
Right. Well, that's true, too. It's kind of like an infamous story, I guess you would say, a juicy one. So more than likely, there are some non-truths to it, and it's been elaborated here and there. But I'll trust whatever you tell me is the truth.
Okay. With that said, then, I'll continue. The land, which once consisted of 290 acres of cane land, was bought by Henry Fanning for 3,000 euros way back in 1742. Henry married a gal by the name of Rosa Kelly on July 16th, 1746, but he died soon afterwards. His widow inherited the estate and eventually remarried a fellow by the name of George Ashe. He was also a local plantation owner who realized Fanning's plan to build Rose Hall. And after dumping a sweet 30,000 euros in to build the stunning home, it was then lavishly decorated with carved mahogany and stone. Talk about big money. But sadly, Ashe died too, just 6 years after marrying Rosa. So back to the sea, for she goes to fish for another man. Mr. Norwood Witter would be lucky number 3. And a year after the death of her second husband, the two became one in May of 1753.
So she really digs being married, I take it.
It seems like it, yeah. Well, she married a guy who had a bunch of land. He wanted to put a big old house on it. They had a plantation. I mean, it's just a lot of shit to take care of.
Yes, I guess. But I wonder if back in those times she had to have a man, she would have been taken advantage of.
So actually, she did inherit a lot of money, from number 1, number 2 passing away.
Right.
But unfortunately, Mr. number 3 might have been a bit of a gold digger, because in their years of marriage, he blew through a rather large amount of Rose's fortune. But I mean, I guess it wasn't that big of a deal, because Mr. Witter kicked the bucket on May 20th, 1765. You see, there was a bit of a pattern here. But John Palmer didn't see the pattern, and on May of 1767, Rosa became happily married to her 4th and last husband, Mr. Palmer. He also happened to be a widower, so I guess they had something in common. Plus, he was the owner of the adjoining plantation known as the Palmyra. I think it's got a weird Y in there, so that trips me up. So it seems the two joined forces here with everything.
So he knew her backstory and was still like, oh, that poor thing. She's just had tough luck this whole time.
Well, like I said, he was a widower too. So, I mean, maybe he was just like, let bygones be bygones, babe. You know, whatever happened in the past, let's keep it in the past. You and me, you know, we're a pair. Who knows what happened to his wife? I'm just saying.
Oh.
Because, unfortunately, this time it was Rosa who passes away in 1790.
Oh.
And she leaves her property to her new husband, John Palmer. Then he too passed away 7 years later, and he leaves the property in trust to his two sons, John and James Palmer. But both men died childless. And in 1818, the two estates passed down to John Rose Palmer, who was his grandnephew. John Rose Palmer came to Jamaica from England to claim the estate, but he finds more than just a beautiful house to call his own. He also met a beautiful young woman, and on March 28th, 1820, he marries Anne Mary Patterson. And just like clockwork, John Rose Palmer suddenly dies. And now a huge estate has been transferred over to Anne. A lot of change in hands going on with this place. So now let's talk about the legend of Annie Palmer, also known as the White Witch. So Annie Palmer was said to be the daughter of an English mother and an Irish father who had decided to move to Haiti. The Pattersons, seeking economic gain, fled to the island during a time when there was political upheaval in Europe. Annie was just 10 years old when she arrived in Saint-Domingue, but she quickly settled into her new life in the French colony. There, she became fascinated with all aspects of her new home and befriended her Haitian nanny, who taught her a variety of necessary life skills, which also included voodoo.
Very necessary.
I agree. Annie was still a young girl when she lost both of her parents. The environment in Haiti was extremely hostile at this time, and there was a lot of uncertainty and peril. Following two slave rebellions, one-time enslaved people were now suddenly freed, but many chose to seek out revenge for their mistreatment. Annie was scared and stayed close to her nanny, who only allowed her to become further versed in the art of voodoo. As she grew older, Annie became a master of the dark arts, including seduction. I didn't know that was part of the dark arts, but I guess you live and you learn. Annie, now an adolescent, was a very beautiful young woman with a delicate petite frame, long flowing hair, penetrating brown eyes, and a creamy white complexion. And she knew how to use her beauty and wit to get whatever she wanted. Annie left Haiti and moved to Jamaica around the age of 17. She was looking to make her fortune, which pretty much seemed to have fallen in her lap the day she met John Palmer. He was completely smitten by her beauty and charm, and having something to offer her, being that he was the sole heir to the Rose Hall estate. He proposes to her, and she accepts. Annie, along with her husband, managed the estate, having nearly 2,000 enslaved people. She loved riding across the estate on her beautiful black horse, viewing the operations of the plantation. At times, she would be seen standing on her balcony, monitoring all as they worked in her fields. But as it turns out, Annie quickly becomes bored with her husband and of the life she had, and this change came pretty quickly after her marriage. Annie sought other amusement, taking male slaves into her bedroom to liven things up a bit. More and more, her lust for her slave men grew until it could no longer be hidden, and she was caught in the act. Her furious husband beat the holy hell out of her, but this would turn out to be a very big mistake. Enraged and feeling betrayed by what her husband did to her, Annie decided that it was his turn to be punished. Annie put poison in the man's coffee, and sip by sip, she watched him die. Then the estate became hers.
That easy, man.
Yep, that's all you gotta do. Double prizes. He's gone, I get a big house. Nice.
It's like nobody was looking out for this guy at all, you know? I mean, he's so far from his family, like in England and stuff. I'm sure it's a little like the Wild Wild West down there. They just do what they want because nobody's going to like inquire on it. You can just, he died of, I don't know, malaria or whatever you would get from like bugs.
Yeah. So for some odd-ass reason, Annie married again 2 more times. But because neither of these men were able to satisfy her, she murdered both of them as well. One by a knife and the other by strangulation. Now, clearly she couldn't... what? How she just keeps going?
Oh, yeah. Divorce obviously doesn't exist.
Mm-mm. Come on, have you seen Forensic Files? She was getting some more money. She's like, and I'll take whatever you've got. Just go ahead and sign your name there on this line. Yeah, I love you, babe. I love you. Stab, stab. But for the one that she strangled, there was no way that she could do that all by herself. She actually had help from one of her enslaved lovers named Taku. He did the dirty work while she watched.
She's a freak.
Yes, ma'am. And allegedly, all 3 of her former husband's bodies were buried somewhere on the Rose Hall estate. Meanwhile, her bed was never empty, for she continued on with her affairs with different male slaves. But she also had a thirst for blood and enjoyed watching her slave men being punished, tortured, and even killed. And if that wasn't enough to scare every man away, well, she was also a jealous lover. So if you are one of her boy toys, don't be looking at other girls. Like I said a second ago, she relished in watching beatings, torture, and all other sorts of abuse. So don't even be thinking about looking at other girls. Sex was just fine for her, but Annie loved to punish men even more. This would ultimately end up being her downfall as she became infatuated with a young English bookkeeper who wasn't interested in Annie whatsoever. This was actually because he had already gone head over heels in love with another young lady, someone who was younger, more beautiful, and her name was Millicent. Jealous and pissed off at being unable to win him for herself, Annie put a curse on Millicent, which caused her to painfully wither and die. But what Annie didn't realize was that she had been sleeping with Millicent's grandpappy, Taku. Remember I mentioned him a little bit ago?
Yeah.
Well, Taku was not only sexy hired help, he was also a voodoo priest. And you know what he did? Well, first he slept with Annie, and then he murdered her.
How did she not know? Being versed in voodoo herself, she couldn't pick up the signs at all? She obviously spent no time getting to know these people before she picked them up as her lovers. It was
girl.
What do they call that? The one where you swipe left and right or whatever?
Oh, yeah, one of those apps. Shit, the sex app, the hookup app, right? The hookup app?
That's not what it's called. But
I'm out of the game.
She's obviously not even reading their profiles, basically.
No, she's not reading their profiles. No, I think just the way that she is presented in the story, she seems like she's just only interested in what she can get out of these situations. What man can she get her hands on next and things like that. Just her own gratification rather than watching her own back. She was out there on a balcony basically saying, okay, well, this slave didn't do what he was supposed to, so beat him out there by that palm tree, and she would just stand there and watch. That was really more of her style than thinking that anyone would ever come out to get her. She just thought that she basically had everyone in the palm of her hand.
Well, she's pretty dumb.
Yeah. Clearly, because this man was he just went about his business, his day. He's supposed to hook up with Annie, so he did. And then while she's sleeping, he's like, stabby, stabby, just like I said a second ago. Yeah, she didn't make it back from that stabby, stabby event, because Taku rounded up a bunch of the slaves from the house and quickly carted her body out. They buried her in a deep grave that still remains on the property and is covered by a tomb. All of the paintings of her had been burned, as well as her clothing, in an attempt to keep her wicked spirit from returning to the house. However, either their ritual didn't work or because Annie was just too powerful. Either way, those that took part in her demise and burial said that her voice resonated throughout Rose Hall for several nights, and they also claimed to see her spirit walking through the rooms of her great house. And now onto Annie Palmer's ghost, who to this day, many claim that she is still tied to the property. She was even blamed for the sudden and mysterious deaths of the proprietors, who immediately took over the great house following Annie's death. Employees of the newly refurbished Rose Hall Great House say that they feel her presence, and eyewitnesses claim she has been spotted riding her black horse across the estate.
Look, I know we're into haunted houses and all, but okay, a realtor's, I'm like, show me some haunted locations. And they take you into this big house and then tell you the story of what this woman used to do there.
Yeah.
It would kind of be like, yeah, no, thanks.
Yeah.
It's just a little dark and fucked up.
Dark. Yeah.
But these next people were like, yay.
Yeah, you're right. Good point.
I mean, I've seen it on TV. It's a very beautiful home. So, yeah, I probably would still buy it. And it's in Jamaica. Oh. But, I mean, I would feel really bad about that really bad history there. What do you do to clean that up? There's not enough sage in the world.
Good point. So, just in case any of that sounds familiar to you, well, it might be because there's even a song written about it. It's called The Ballad of Annie Palmer, and it's by none other than Johnny Cash. Now, Cash owned the nearby Cinnamon Hill Great House, and he undoubtedly would have heard all the same legends as the folks would have in the area. And since Cash believed in spirits, it makes sense that he would have picked up on this and was probably curious about the legend as well. Johnny Cash also thought that his house was haunted, but he said he was fine with it. He liked the ghosts. But aside from Johnny Cash knowing about this old story, the legend of the White Witch and Rose Hall, this story has also become quite popular amongst the television world too. Do people even say television anymore? I don't know. I feel like I should be saying picture box or boob tube. I mean, I feel like...
Definitely don't say picture box. I think that's worse.
I feel like boob tube? No.
That one might work, but picture box sounds like when TVs first came out, you know?
Yeah, that's how I feel like when I say television. It's such a long word. I don't even say it anymore. It's just TV. But yeah, anyways, so the house has been featured in such fine programs as the 19th season finale of America's Next Top Model. It featured its final runway show taking place at Rose Hall. It was on Scariest Places on Earth, Ghost Hunters International, Ghost Adventures, Ghost Brothers, Steve DeShavi and Amy Allen of the Dead Files, and I had to leave this one for last because it's of great significance to Wendy. Outlander featured Rose Hall in season 3.
Yes, it did.
Anywho, so, I had to go back and watch these sweet paranormal shows. And trust me, if I had time to have looked for the America's Next Top Model episode, I most certainly would have.
Yes, I did not think that was going to come out of your mouth. I have to know how that went down. I also would like to watch the Ghost Brothers episode. I've not seen that one before. So I'd love to know what experiences they had there. I'm sure she likes seeing them.
I'm so glad that you want to hear about their experiences because that's what I got right next in the chamber. I got it loaded for you. So, Ghost Brothers. Yes, this was a fantastic show. Yes, I will link it, so you have to watch it. They are in the house, and as they begin, they're, basically just interviewing one of the tour guides, right? They're in the room known as Annie's sitting room, and it's said to be one of the most haunted spots in the whole house. A door on an armoire directly in front of the 3 Ghost Brothers just swings right open. Just... The tour guide is standing right in front of it, but her back is to it. So she doesn't even know that thing just opened. But all 3 of them see it, and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. So, they're flipping out. The tour guide standing there, she knows what's going on. She says, that's Annie's spirit, and she hightails it out of there. So I'm not staying. I'm gone. So now when they go into their investigation, now it's nighttime. Daylin decides that he's got to go back into that room and go back up to that armoire. He felt like definitely something was going on there. But he takes it a step further and he actually goes into the armoire. The thing is so big that this man can actually climb up in it.
Oh, it's like Narnia style. Like you can climb into the wardrobe.
Yes, right. It's, just like that. That's what I was like too. He's like, go in it. Like, really? You're going to, and he opens it up. I'm like, oh, okay, there's really nothing in it. He just got in it. And while he's in there and he shuts the door too, he catches a creepy, disembodied breath. You can hear it very clearly, and it sounds like a male raspy voice. He hears it just as clearly as you hear it in the clip, and you know what he did? He sure as shit bolted out of that armoire, just like I did when I was in the closet at the S.K. Pierce house.
That's exactly how I was envisioning it.
That's exactly what happened. He bolted out of it. And when he gets out of it, like he's expecting to see someone there, just like I saw Wendy, but he saw nobody. So he was just like, and he just talks about hearing the breath. You can clearly hear it in that video. So later on, Daylin asks a bunch of questions directly to Annie regarding the stories about murder and like all of that. But he doesn't seem to be getting any answers. Nothing. Like it's just very still, suddenly very quiet. So he sits down on one of the couches and he's getting more relaxed because, like I said, nothing is seeming to be happening for him at this point. And he starts joking around like, oh, Annie had all the brothers and she was picking them and then picking them off. And he says, Annie had jungle fever. And right after he said that, a loud bang directly behind him, like smashes into the wall. He jumps up. He says he felt like the whole area behind him shake. And he's looking around like, what the hell happened? Like he's expecting to see something had crashed, something had broken. There's nothing there. Like you could tell, like, what the hell just happened? Where is it? You heard it. It should have been there. And there was nothing there. So then pan to Juwan, who decides that he's going to interact with Annie in her bedroom. He sits down, takes his shoes off, and suddenly the REM pod lights up a little bit. You know, it's like that little black thing with little lights in the antenna. Yeah. Then he stands up, takes his shirt off, and the REM pod lights start pulsating, and now it's beeping and stuff too, right? So then he goes over to the bed and lays down, and he's kind of like rolling around and just enjoying himself. And the REM pod is fucking screaming at this point. It's like, there's not even beeping. It's just like, you know, it's going bananas. So he's feeling pretty good about himself. He's feeling like he's tantalizing the spirits. So he finally gets off the bed. The whole time the REM pod is still screeching and pulsing and just going crazy. So he says, "Stop making noise if this isn't Annie." And the fucking thing stops in its tracks. Nothing. All of a sudden, it was going ape shit. And he says, "Stop making noise if this isn't Annie," and it quit. And Juwan's like, "You're not Annie?"
So he's like, well, that was awkward.
Right, yeah, it was exactly like that. Nothing else is happening. Like, the REM pod is dead. So, yeah, it's awkward. He's like, "Am I in here with one of the slaves?" Nothing. He says, "Am I in here with Taku?" And the thing starts fucking screaming again. He throws his shirt back on, grabs his shoes, and he splits.
Well, I was thinking it could have been the first woman, you know, Rosa.
Yeah.
'Cause she loved men, obviously, as well.
Yes. Yeah,
but no,
exactly.
That's not what it was at all.
I thought it was very funny how it all played out. And of course, you know, I think he kind of got shook up a bit because at first he was feeling all like, yeah, these spirits are loving me. You know,
He feels really good about himself.
Yeah, exactly. And then he's like, oh, wait, who am I really in here with? Hands down, you've got to see this episode. It's fucking awesome. Then they all went to the main floor and begin hearing strange sounds like footsteps and knocking. And it seems to be kind of like they're chasing it almost. They keep hearing things, but it's coming in threes, but it's never in a certain part. Like they would be in one room, the noise is out there. So they'd go and investigate it, then they'd be in another room. It's like they're following something. So Juwan suddenly gets the idea that because they keep hearing it in threes, that maybe it was meant as an indication of the 3 husbands that Annie had murdered. So he also brings up the Johnny Cash song. And in it, Johnny Cash says that per the legend, the 3 husbands were all buried underneath the palms outside of the house. So they're like, cool, let's go and investigate and see if they're out there. Well, they don't find anything, but I still thought it was really cool that they took a note from Johnny Cash and at least did what they could to explore it. So then Marcus ends up investigating by Annie's tomb while Daylin and Juwan go to the main cemetery. Now, nothing really major happens for either of them beyond this point, except Marcus hears footsteps approaching him from the nearby wooded area, and he's clearly startled. Nothing else comes of it at that point, but you know there was something else over there.
But couldn't it have been like possibly an animal or something too?
They are outside.
Right. I'm actually surprised that you said they went and investigated outside because, I mean, they do great investigations. They get really great evidence, but they act like some scaredy cat sometimes. And so I'm impressed that they went outside knowing that they contend with whatever spirits are out there, but also whatever like wildlife's out there.
Well, so actually that wasn't one of the highlights. I wasn't intending to leave that in, but there is a coinciding experience from another one of the shows that I'm going to bring up in a little bit. So I had to actually put that back into my notes. And you're right when you say about the like scaredy cats version. And I think that just in my mind, like it just makes them so much more realistic. You know, they're jokesters. They're out there having a good time, but they're also investigating. And when they get scared, they sure as shit get scared. And it's just all over them. You know, like the fact when he was like, "You're who? This is Taku." And he grabs his shit and he runs. He runs into the other 2 ghost brothers who were coming up because they were watching him in a camera downstairs while he's trying to act all sexy for these ghosts. They're cracking up. So they're like, we cannot let this man do this. So they're going up there basically to put an end to this nonsense. And he like runs right into him. It is so Scooby-Doo, you know.
It's funny. It's also realistic. I mean, as badass as we think we are, when a cabinet door opens or whatever, you're a little like, shit. You know? It's exactly what you were there for. And it's just a cabinet door and it's just a REM pod going off. But, you know, in the right moment, there's this like an energy that builds up that smallest little things can spook you.
Oh, yeah. I know for a fact. I know because that happens happens to me quite often. But yeah, it was a great episode. I will definitely link it so that you all can watch it too. Now on to Ghost Adventures. And unfortunately for Ghost Adventures, their show wasn't as action-packed as Ghost Brothers was. However, they still had some pretty impressive experiences. And as always, I love watching Ghost Adventures back in the Nick era. To me, it just seems like they were having a little bit more fun with it. So to start off their investigation, they brought in a security officer named Wilson to use as human bait for Annie. Don't worry, he seemed way more into it than he really should have been.
And he's the security guard of the property, right? He's there all the time.
All the time. So he's like, yeah, this is my time to shine. Like, you can see him, like, putting on cologne and kind of dancing and stuff, like, getting ready for this. He was super excited. He was pumped. And while they all gathered in Annie's bedroom, they set up a REM pod around him on the floor. And that thing seemed to be answering by lighting up and beeping basically on cue, just like in the Ghost Brothers, which I thought was pretty validating for paranormal experience. But they weren't getting anything in the way of who they were talking to. It was just like yes, I'm here. That's all you need to know. All right. So then the Ghost Adventures asked if the stories were all true. They capture a voice that whispers, yes. And to me, it actually sounds like a male voice saying yes. In the same room, they captured another voice saying, oh my goodness. And they all felt that this was directed in a sexual manner towards their human bait, Wilson.
Was it a lady's voice that they could tell?
I couldn't hear it at all. And that's just because the version that is free and on YouTube, it's one of those where somebody's changed like the pitch of the voice.
So that they can put it on there, yeah.
Yeah. So it actually sounds like a chipmunk to me.
That's kinky.
Yeah.
And illegal. Leave those animals alone.
So I would assume that it must have been a female's voice because he was pretty giddy. Wilson was very excited for the attention that he was getting. When he heard that voice, like he was just impressed, with himself. He was like, yeah, I still got it. Ladies. So after they dismissed Wilson, Nick, Aaron, and Zach all tried to stir up activity in separate rooms, acting as if each one of them were the previously murdered husbands. But only Aaron gets any action this time. And it was kind of creepy, too. He hears a female screaming in his ear, and he caught it on his digital recorder, which is my absolute most favorite piece of ghost hunting equipment. Guys, I just never leave home without that thing. Never know what you're going to get. And it's so impressive to me that he heard it with his own ears. He says, hey, guys, I just heard a woman screaming. And then on his recorder, it's like a blood-curdling scream.
That's
like
awesome.
Probably someone waking up from a dream in the middle of the night. So then a little later on, Zach decides to send Aaron out to Annie's tomb alone to investigate. And while out there, Aaron tries to communicate, and he asks if there's any spirits there to just walk up to him. And at that exact moment, he hears footsteps coming to him from the wooded area. So that was the part that I meant, that it seemed like it was the same thing as what Ghost Brothers had. And again, I wasn't even going to leave the Ghost Brothers one in there because I'm like, dude, it's fucking outside. It could be anything. I don't know what they have in Jamaica. Shit, it could be, a giant lizard for all I know. It's footsteps, though. It's so, and Aaron's definitely going to go and look, while Marcus was like, they didn't say nothing about investigating the woods, so I don't have to. So now the Ghost Adventures crew really lucked out on this episode, because not only did they have an eventful investigation at Rose Hall, but they also got a special tour of, and somehow also swindled another investigation by locking down Johnny Cash's Cinnamon Hall. And at that time, they were the only team to have ever investigated the Cash house. And they came away with something pretty fucking epic. First of all, I'm not going to spoil the whole episode because I was pretty intrigued seeing all of this myself. So I'll leave that for you to check out. But the one thing that I had to share is that they caught an amazing voice while using the spirit box. Zach asks, did you like listening to Johnny Cash's music? And the voice comes across saying, I do. But the part that's really mind-blowing is that it sounds just like Johnny Cash.
Conceited much? Listening to his own music.
That's right, exactly. It was loud. It was a voice that comes across multiple stations, and they had it analyzed and compared it to Johnny Cash's voice. And guess what? It's pretty much the voice of Johnny Cash. But as I mentioned, they're doing it with a spirit box that is spanning through multiple stations. I think it would be odd for them to get I Do that sounds just like the same man, especially being a recognizable voice like Johnny Cash's, to come through 2 different stations. Sure, one of his songs might have been playing on those stations, but that was a little different for me, and I took that as really good evidence. So, definitely check that out when I link it. Again, I'll try my best to find a better version of the episode that I can link so that you don't have to listen to the chipmunk voices like I do, but it's an interesting one to say the least. So now on to Ghost Hunters International, who had a completely different investigation. They were able to explain away almost every type of reported phenomenon that they were faced with, either proving or disproving each of those claims. But they also had a few experiences that seemed to parallel with the other shows. For example, whenever questions seem to be directed to Annie Palmer, there are almost no meter responses. But then when they ask questions, sometimes directing it towards a male, then there's a little bit of activity. Barry from Ghost Hunters International switched his direction while in the upstairs sitting room after catching the scent of tobacco. He starts asking questions like, is there a male in the room? And what's your name? And all things to that degree while being extremely polite. And then suddenly there's a very loud noise heard in the room. He says it sounds like something being bounced on the floor. I thought it sounded like that door on the armoire popping open again. It's like it was a weird noise. What was it though? Dude, I have no fucking clue because in true Ghost Hunters fashion, the camera never left poor Barry's face. And because it's pitch black in that room. I mean, Barry doesn't have like a flashlight. The infrared camera is facing him. He's just looking out into darkness. He couldn't see a damn thing. He's just like, well, I heard it.
Okay.
And that's it. Thanks, Ghost Hunters. So where does all of this leave us? Once again, we have more questions than answers. However, there has been a little more on the story to surface recently, and it only makes the activity found at this location even more mysterious. An investigation of the White Witch legend from 2007 by Benjamin Radford concluded that the story was completely fictionalized, having been based on the title character in a famous Jamaican novel called The White Witch of Rose Hall by Herbert G. de Lassier. The book was published in 1929, and in the novel, you'll learn all about Annie Palmer and her wicked ways, which seem to have sparked the in-depth portion of this incredible tale that's been told in Jamaica for dozens of years. Also, in The Rough Guide to Jamaica by Polly Thomas, it seemed to imply that Annie Palmer may have become confused with Rosa Palmer, who was the original mistress of Rose Hall and did in fact have multiple husbands, which of course died under mysterious circumstances. And as for the young lady Anne Mary Patterson, aka Annie Palmer, well, she was a real woman, just not the woman from the story. Poor Anne seems to have been the result of mistaken identity, someone who became a legend based on a story that started out as a note in a pamphlet from the 1860s, which was actually written about the adjacent estate, the Palmyra? I don't remember how I said it earlier, so whatever. But you remember I did say it earlier.
You did, yeah.
That was actually the plantation that Rosa then acquired when she married her 4th husband in the late 1700s.
Right.
So recently it's been decided that it's most likely Rosa Palmer that's haunting the mansion. Annie Palmer might be there too, but because of all of the historic things that have actually happened on that property, it's probably not just those 2 women. There was a lot of shit that actually happened there historically. There were slaves on the property. There was even a slave rebellion, which ended in loss of lives during and even more so afterwards as slavery was abolished, which apparently pissed off a lot of white plantation owners. The violence then spun out of control for a while, and that sort of thing, really leaves its mark.
Absolutely.
So, the White Witch legend, I think it was juiced. And if you go back and watch those shows, like the ones that I had just mentioned, you'll see the types of responses that everyone was getting. It's almost like they want to respond, but they're like, you're not really asking us the right questions.
They're like, we don't know what you're talking about.
Right. And like I said, Annie and Rosa, they are 2 spirits that are featured prominently, and a lot of psychic mediums have been there and they feel more so it's them. But like I said, the story was juiced a bit to give it that sexy spin, I guess, to bring in the tourism. I don't know, whatever. But there's a lot of activity in the house, regardless of the White Witch story existing or not.
But the stories that they supposedly made up, they're not too far from what could have possibly been happening there.
No.
Rosa obviously has an interesting story there. Yeah. Really, her husbands could have just been picking up disease. They could have had accidents. This is like a new land for them.
Yep.
And she could have been a Black Widow that then got hers in the end. And who's to say that they weren't, torturing or beating, abusing their slaves?
No. Yeah.
Sexually and physically. That stuff happened.
Right.
So it's like these things could have still been happening, whether they happened like exactly the way that this book has made it out to be. But it's not too far from the truth, I would assume.
Basically, what I got out of it was that because everyone went in investigating the White Witch of Rose Hall, looking for it to be Annie Palmer, that's the only thing that they were going to get out of it. And unfortunately, Annie Palmer probably isn't the White Witch. If there is one, it's most likely going to be Rosa, because like you said, it seemed like she was a little bit of a Black Widow. She went through some husbands. Annie Palmer, she just so happened to have the same name as a lady in a book who did some pretty horrible things. And they're just like, that house is right around the corner. And she did have a couple of husbands. It was easy for those two stories to get kind of lost in translation.
Yeah.
And easy to juice it up because there is a story similar to it right there. So, in everyone else's eyes, it's the same thing. The thing that I thought was the most fascinating is that there were so many similarities. I could see this as being like, you're fucking kidding me. What? That didn't happen? No, her name's the same. It's what? Come on. Now you're lying to me, right? Like, it was just one of those kind of things. But it's definitely a location that has paranormal activity. The people that work there and the people that have taken tours there have come away with crazy reports. They state that they've heard mysterious voices, have had the feeling like someone's right on top of them, basically. But they turn around and there's nobody there. When you got someone basically on your heels, like when you're fucking going through Walmart, and I'm like, come on, 6 feet away from me. They've even reported seeing a dark human-like shadow and spotting mysterious figures in the windows, as well as constantly running into strange occurrences. People have seen other apparitions of human beings that look to be of slaves, that look like they have been tortured. There's a lot of feelings that are just absorbed emotionally into these walls, and I think that it resonates still to this day. These people were not treated right. There's that sickness, and those people are not able to rest easy, and I think maybe let's go and talk to them. Let's get their story, because there's no witch there, I don't think. There's actual historic events that happened there. And if you know more about the story, which we do now, because a historian decided, let's find out about this. And he backdated it. He found out where Rosa Hall was buried. He found out where Annie Hall was buried. Neither one of them happened to be buried in that tomb on Rose Hall Plantation. So we don't know to this day who is buried there.
That's interesting.
Right. There's just so many different things that we still need to know about this property. But by going in and only asking Annie Palmer, the White Witch, about the things that she did, I don't think we're going to come to any more conclusions than just that. We need to be a little bit more open, I think, to some of the other possibilities and some of the other people's lives that have been affected from the things that happened there.
Yeah, like we might go into a location and, all the facts aren't hard facts, but we're still going to bring those stories up just to see if you could spike activity. But for the most part, you're going to go in and just kind of get a feel for the space and allow it to try to talk to you.
Yes.
Whoever's there. That's the way everybody should approach all investigations, really. Unless you've got even if you have hard facts that this person lived here and then they passed away here, it still could be another spirit there. So always take some time to really allow the space to just tell you what's going on.
Exactly my point. I was going to say, definitely when doing paranormal investigations, don't just put your blinders on, because you never know who could be on the other side trying to come through. And also, don't put your blinders on when you finish listening to this podcast. So do hit subscribe. Do like us on our socials and follow us everywhere, because we release content related to the shows and sometimes things that get left out. Not to mention, we also have a sweet Etsy shop filled to the brim of spiritual goodies if you're looking for that one-of-a-kind find. So stop by and show us some support. Find us on Instagram as COTN_paranormal and as The Spirit Emporium. On Facebook and Twitter as COTN Paranormal and The Spirit Emporium. And again on Etsy as The Spirit Emporium. Also, we have email. Have we missed something? I know I just blazed through a whole legendary story and might have slipped and missed a few things. Write to us at creaturesofthenightparanormal@gmail.com and let us know. Or if you've got a favorite place that you want to hear more about, just write to us at that email address too. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I especially would be happy for some suggestions because I fucking flop around all week long with stories. I need somebody to tell me what to do. Don't leave me up to my own demise here, just making a mess of things. But this story was awesome. I'm so glad that you did it. It's a location I knew about. I've heard the story like long time. You know, it was that Ghost Adventures episode. And then that's really it. That's all I've ever seen it. I've seen just recently some paranormal group that I follow on Instagram went there.
Wow.
Before all the virus stuff. They're so lucky they made it in before all of that. I bet it's beautiful there.
I know.
Do you know, can you like stay there or rent? I mean, like, you can't afford to rent that whole damn thing out. So do you just take tours or can you stay like Airbnb or like a hotel, you know?
I wish to set up like a museum, and I think that they will let you in if you're willing to pay. I don't think it's like an Airbnb at all. And they have a lot of artifacts up in there too, so they're not willing to just let you sign a paper and hope to God that you don't screw up, the shit that's in the house.
That you don't break the armoire as you hide in it and then punch it out.
Yes, you've got to be Ghost Brothers to roll up in there and be like, and I'm going to get in that armoire. Is that cool? I mean, because I don't think that would work for us. It'd be like, get your asses back on downstairs and out of this house. Like, no, but they got to do it. I didn't get to touch on the Dead Files episode in my story whatsoever, but damn, that's a good one. I'm not going to be able to link it because it's one that you have to pay for, and I don't think they'll let you link those on Twitter. But it was their season 7 premiere episode, so it's a good one. Definitely one of those episodes where you watch it in the darkness with a glass of wine. It's, the Dead Files just does that to you. It's creepy, man. And then you get Amy Allen's extra creepy faces that she does.
Her big eyes.
Big old eyeballs, and she's just like feeling every ounce of energy. And when she says the word vicious in that episode, it's like loud and it resonates through the TV. And I'm like, I love this story so much.
I'll have to watch that one too.
Well, that's why I didn't really want to discuss it so much, because it's not something that I can link and you have to pay money for it. I like the ones that I can actually share, and who doesn't like to be able to see something from the past that's free? So if you can catch it maybe on DirecTV or what is it when you can...
If it's on demand, on whatever TV program you have.
Right, on that television set.
On that TV set.
Well, if it is and you can catch it, I definitely recommend it. They got some really good information. It really brings more light to the historical events that took place here. They're a bit dark. I just lightly touched on it, but I highly recommend that episode. It was great. I recommend all the episodes, maybe not so much like the Ghost Hunters episode because they didn't catch anything, but that's not to their fault. They are a team of people who mostly debunk. That's just what they do.
Yeah,
so
that's their specialty, I guess.
And they were able to lay some of those claims to rest. So, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Watch them all, have your own opinion of these things, and definitely, whenever you can, do your own investigation work because it's just the best. Isn't it, Wendy? Don't you just love investigating places?
Yeah, especially Jamaica.
Jamaica, yes, definitely.
Please take me there, which I don't think that we can go there right now. But
yeah, I'm sure there's a travel ban on Jamaica right now. Unfortunately, maybe someday we will be coming to Jamaica. But for now, that's all I got for you.
All right, that was awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.